WWE banned these matches forever, and after you see what happened, you'll understand why. Let's kick this off with literal fire. The Inferno match wasn't just dangerous, it was straight up psychotic. Picture this, they surrounded the entire ring with real flames shooting up from propane pipes. Your only job, set your opponent on fire. Yeah, you heard that right. Kane vs. Undertaker at Unforgiven 98 was the first time WWE said, let's see what happens when we add fire to fake fighting. The flames would actually get higher when wrestlers hit big moves because of motion sensors. That's not wrestling, that's a death wish with better production value. But here's the kicker, there was literally no way to practice this safely. You can't rehearse getting set on fire, bro. Fire marshals had to be ringside for every single match, and the heat was so intense it screwed with the cameras and made it impossible for fans to see clearly. The last real Inferno match happened in 2006. WWE tried to bring it back in 2020 with some Hollywood movie magic, but even they knew live fire was too insane. When a company that once had a wrestler give birth to a hand thinks your match is too dangerous, maybe it's time to pump the brakes. If setting people on fire wasn't metal enough, WWE decided to literally bury wrestlers alive. The Buried Alive match debuted in '96 with Undertaker and Mankind, and the rules were simple. Drag your opponent to a pre-dug grave and bury them under actual dirt. This wasn't some Hollywood set piece. They brought in dump trucks full of real soil and dug actual graves. These matches only happened at night because apparently burying someone alive in broad daylight doesn't have the same vibe. The whole setup required construction crews, heavy machinery, and probably a few therapy sessions for everyone involved. The safety concerns were obvious. What happens if someone actually gets buried and can't breathe? What if the dirt collapses wrong? WWE had hidden trapdoors and safety measures, but you're still talking about simulating murder on live TV. The last Buried Alive match was Undertaker vs. Kane in 2010. By then, WWE was moving toward their PG era, and apparently family-friendly entertainment doesn't include watching someone get buried alive. Wild concept, right? The symbolism alone was enough to kill this match type. Nothing says we care about our performers like literally putting them in graves. Here's where WWE completely lost their minds. In 1998, they created the Brawl for All, a tournament where wrestlers had real fights, no scripts, no predetermined winners, just dudes throwing actual punches at each other's faces. The format was 3 one-minute rounds with judges scoring based on real punches landed, takedowns, and knockdowns. This wasn't sports entertainment. This was just sports, and most wrestlers sucked at it. Steve Dr. Death Williams was supposed to be the golden boy, the future main eventer. Instead, he tore his hamstring and got eliminated early, completely derailing his WWE career. Bart Gunn won the whole tournament, and his reward, getting knocked unconscious by professional boxer Butterbean in 34 seconds at WrestleMania 15. Career over. The Brawl for All exposed that most wrestlers couldn't actually fight, injured multiple performers, and provided zero long-term storyline benefits. It was like WWE decided to shoot themselves in the foot, but with more concussions. This tournament single-handedly proved why wrestling is scripted. When you let wrestlers actually fight, people get hurt, careers get ruined, and your carefully planned storylines go straight to hell. The Kennel from Hell match happened exactly once, and that was one time too many. WWE took a regular steel cage, put it inside Hell in a cell, and filled the space between with trained attack dogs. The goal was to escape both cages without getting mauled. Al Snow vs. Big Boss Man at Unforgiven 99 was supposed to be intense and dangerous. Instead, it became the most unintentionally hilarious disaster in WWE history. The attack dogs spent the entire match barking, peeing, pooping, and trying to mate with each other on live television. These dogs were about as aggressive as golden retrievers at a dog park. Instead of creating fear, they created a literal shit show. The double cage setup made it impossible for fans to see anything, and the wrestlers could barely move around the cramped space. WWE never tried this again, and for good reason. You can't control live animals, especially when they're more interested in each other than the fake fighting happening nearby. The match match became an instant meme before memes were even a thing. It's still considered one of the worst match concepts in wrestling history, and honestly, that's an achievement in itself. The Punjabi prison match was WWE's attempt to create something unique for the Great Khali, and it was about as successful as you'd expect. Picture two massive bamboo structures, an inner cage with timed trap doors, and an outer cage you had to climb to escape. The bamboo looked cool, but was reinforced with steel, making these cages incredibly heavy and impossible to move naturally. The inner cage had 4 doors that would open and close on timers, adding a game show element to what was supposed to be a fight. Visibility was terrible for both fans and cameras. The bamboo blocked sight lines, and watching someone slowly climb a giant cage isn't exactly edge-of-your-seat entertainment. The matches felt more like watching someone escape from a really elaborate jungle gym. WWE tried this in 2006 and 2007, both times to lukewarm reactions. They brought it back once in 2017 for Jinder Mahal, probably hoping people forgot how boring it was the first time. Spoiler alert, it was still boring. The concept looked unique on paper, but in practice it was slow, clunky, and visually confusing. Sometimes simple is better, and this match proved that more isn't always more. The Attitude Era gave us some legendary moments, but it also gave us evening gown and bra and panties matches. The rules were simple: strip your opponent down to their underwear to win. No pinfalls, no submissions, just public undressing on live TV. These matches were pure Attitude Era chaos, all about shock value and pushing boundaries. The commentary was loaded with innuendo, camera angles were strategically placed, and wardrobe malfunctions were definitely not accidental. While they got crowd reactions and fit the era's edgy vibe, these matches completely undermined women's wrestling. Talented performers were reduced to eye candy, and actual wrestling skills took a backseat to entertainment value. WWE quietly dropped these match types when they shifted to PG programming in 2008. By the time the women's evolution started in the mid-2010s, the idea of winning by stripping someone seemed prehistoric. Looking back, these matches represent a specific time in wrestling history when controversy sold tickets, but they also show how far women's wrestling has evolved from being treated as a sideshow to main event attractions. The company realized that treating female performers as athletes rather than objects was not only the right thing to do, it was also better business. The Lion's Den match was WWE's attempt to capitalize on the growing popularity of MMA in the late 90s. They built a circular cage with sloped walls and no ropes, and matches could only end by submission or knockout. Ken Shamrock, being a legitimate UFC veteran, was the perfect guy to showcase this format. The setup looked legit and gave matches a more serious combat sports feel. WWE used it 3 times between 1998 and 1999, including bouts with Owen Hart and Steve Blackman. The problem was pacing. Without the ability to use ropes for momentum or high-flying moves, matches became slow-paced grappling exhibitions. The crowd was separated from the action, making it harder to build energy and excitement. The Lion's Den also cost a fortune to set up and transport. For a company focused on spectacle and entertainment, a format that emphasized realistic fighting didn't fit the WWE brand. After 1999, WWE quietly retired the concept. They realized that fans came to wrestling for larger-than-life characters and dramatic storylines, not legitimate combat sports. The Lion's Den was too real for sports entertainment. It was an interesting experiment that showed WWE's willingness to try new things, but ultimately proved that wrestling and MMA serve different audiences. Scaffold matches involved fighting on a narrow platform suspended 15 to 20 feet above the ring. The goal was simple: throw your opponent off the scaffold and watch them crash. WWE never fully embraced this format, but they acquired footage from other promotions that did. The most famous example was the 1986 Skywalker's match at Starrcade, featuring the Road Warriors versus the Midnight Express. ECW also featured scaffold-style matches, including the high-incident match in 1996 with Tommy Dreamer and Brian Lee. These matches were terrifying to watch because the danger was completely real. Wrestlers had almost no room to move on the narrow platform, and every spot had to be carefully planned to avoid serious injury or death. Even a controlled fall from that height could cause permanent damage. There was no safe way to take a bump from a scaffold, making every moment genuinely dangerous for the performers. WWE's reluctance to use this format showed their growing awareness of performer safety. While other promotions were willing to risk their wrestlers' lives for shock value, WWE recognized that some risks weren't worth taking. The visual of wrestlers fighting high above the ring was undeniably dramatic, but the potential for tragedy made it unsustainable as regular entertainment. The blindfold match required both wrestlers to wear black hoods that completely blocked their vision. Victory still came by pinfall or submission, but without the ability to see your opponent or the ring. The most notable example happened at WrestleMania 7 in 1991 between Jake Roberts and Rick Martel. The concept was supposed to create suspense and unpredictability, but instead created long stretches of wrestlers stumbling around looking for each other. Wrestlers had to rely on crowd noise to locate their opponents, which sounds cool in theory but was boring in practice. Extended periods of inactivity and missed moves made matches feel disconnected and awkward. The format also eliminated most of wrestling's visual appeal. Fans couldn't see facial expressions, couldn't anticipate moves, and couldn't follow the story being told in the ring. WWE gradually phased out blindfold matches due to poor pacing and lack of audience engagement. The novelty wore off quickly, and the execution rarely lived up to the concept's potential. It was one of those ideas that sounded interesting on paper, but proved that wrestling relies heavily on visual storytelling and athletic precision, both of which are impossible when you can't see. Hardcore matches in the Attitude Era often featured thumbtacks, thousands of small metal pins scattered across the ring. Wrestlers like Cactus Jack, Terry Funk, and the Dudley Boys made these spots infamous by taking real bumps onto the tacks. These weren't gimmicked props or special effects. These were actual thumbtacks that embedded directly into wrestlers' skin, causing real puncture wounds, bleeding, and permanent scarring. The pain was legitimate and the risks were serious. Thumbtack spots were impossible to fake and dangerous to execute. Wrestlers faced risks of infection, nerve damage, and permanent scarring. The visual impact was undeniable, but the human cost was too high. WWE phased out thumbtack usage when they shifted to PG programming in 2008. While a few rare exceptions have occurred in cinematic matches or special events, they're no longer part of regular match design. The ban represented WWE's evolution from shock value entertainment to a more responsible approach to performer safety. The company realized that making pain look too real crossed a line that even hardcore wrestling fans weren't comfortable with. Thumbtacks became a symbol of the Attitude Era's excess, a time when pushing boundaries sometimes meant pushing too far. These banned matches tell the story of WWE's evolution from a company willing to risk everything for entertainment to one that prioritizes performer safety and family-friendly content. Some were banned for being too dangerous, others for being too ridiculous, and a few for being too real. Each ban represents a lesson learned, a line crossed, or a boundary established. WWE's willingness to experiment gave us some unforgettable moments, but their wisdom in knowing when to stop kept their performers alive and their brand sustainable. What's your take? Were these bans necessary, or did WWE go soft? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button if this brought back some memories, and subscribe for more wrestling content that goes deeper than the surface. Because in wrestling, sometimes the most interesting stories are the ones they don't want you to see anymore.